Daniel was a man who had always lived a simple life. He was in his late 30s, and every day for him was almost the same. He woke up early in the morning, washed his face with cold water to chase away the sleep, and quickly dressed in his delivery uniform. His small house was in a crowded street where neighbors knew each other well. Daniel's wife, Maria, always prepared his breakfast before he left, usually bread, eggs, and tea. Their young son, Adam, would sometimes wake up early to hug his father before he left for work, but most mornings Adam would still be asleep, curled up in the blanket. Daniel worked as a delivery man for a small company in the city. The job was not easy. It required him to carry heavy boxes, drive long distances, and face the heat, the rain, and even the cold winds during winter. Yet he never complained because he knew his family depended on him. He dreamed of sending Adam to a good school so that one day his son would have a better life than him. Every time he saw Adam holding his books, Daniel promised himself silently that he would do everything possible to make sure his son's future was bright. On that particular morning, Daniel left home in a bit of a hurry. He had more deliveries than usual, and his boss had been strict with him the past few weeks. He drove his old delivery van through the busy streets of the city, moving quickly but carefully, because one small accident could cost him his job. He hummed a little tune as he drove, trying to keep himself positive. The city was alive as always. Shops were opening, children in uniforms were rushing toward their schools, and office workers were waiting at bus stops. Daniel slowed down near a traffic signal, and it was then that he noticed something unusual. On the side of the road, just a little ahead, stood a young girl with two heavy suitcases. She was looking around anxiously, her face pale with worry. Daniel had seen people carrying luggage before, but what caught his attention was the way she kept checking her watch and biting her lip nervously. When the light turned green, Daniel drove a little further and then stopped his van near the girl. He rolled down his window and asked, "Are you all right? Do you need help?" The girl looked at him as though she had just found a ray of hope. "Sir, I was supposed to take a taxi to the airport, but it never came. I called again and again, but no one picked up. My flight is in less than an hour. Please, can you help me? If I don't get there in time, I'll miss it." Daniel hesitated. His heart wanted to help, but his mind reminded him of the deliveries waiting in the back of his van. His boss had warned him only last week that another delay would not be tolerated. He thought about his wife and son. He thought about how much they needed his income. But then he looked at the girl again. Her eyes were full of fear and hope, and Daniel realized she might lose something very important if she didn't get to the airport. "All right," he finally said. "Get in. I'll take you there." The girl's face lit up with relief. She quickly loaded her bags into the van with Daniel's help and climbed into the passenger seat. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You don't know how much this means to me." As Daniel started driving toward the airport, the girl began to explain her situation. Her name was Sarah. She was a college student who had been offered a scholarship abroad. This flight was taking her to another country where she would begin her studies. "If I miss this flight," she said with a trembling voice, "I might lose my chance. This scholarship is everything to me. My family has been waiting for this moment for years." Daniel listened quietly as he drove through the traffic. Her words touched him. He thought about his own son and how one opportunity could change a young person's life forever. Suddenly, helping Sarah didn't feel like just an act of kindness. It felt like something he had to do, almost like fate had placed him there for a reason. The roads were busy, and Daniel had to drive faster than usual while still being careful. Cars honked, motorbikes weaved in and out, and pedestrians hurried across the streets. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and he focused on every turn. Sarah kept looking at her watch, her fingers twisting nervously. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked more than once. "We'll make it," Daniel assured her, though deep down he wasn't entirely sure. But he wanted to give her hope. As they neared the airport road, Daniel pressed harder on the accelerator. He thought about the boxes in the back of the van that were supposed to be delivered on time. He thought about how angry his boss would be when he found out he had gone off route. But then he looked at Sarah, and something inside him said, "This is worth it." Finally, the tall buildings around the airport came into view. Sarah gasped with relief. "We're here. Oh my goodness, we're here. Thank you." Daniel pulled up near the departure gate and quickly helped her with her luggage. Sarah's eyes were shiny with tears as she grabbed his hands. "I don't know how to thank you. You've just saved my future. God bless you." Daniel smiled faintly. "Just go. Don't waste time. Catch your flight." Sarah nodded, wiped her tears quickly, and ran toward the entrance, dragging her bags behind her. Daniel stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the crowd of passengers. He felt strangely satisfied, as though he had done something right. But as he turned back to his van, a heavy thought settled in his heart. He knew he was late. His boss would not understand. He sighed deeply, started the engine, and drove back toward his delivery route. He didn't know what awaited him, but in that moment, he tried to hold on to the comfort of having helped someone in need. Daniel drove away from the airport with a strange mix of feelings inside him. On one side, his heart felt light because he had helped a young girl who was chasing her dreams. On the other side, his mind was heavy because he knew he was late for his deliveries. His boss was not the type of man who cared for excuses. To him, work came first, and anything else was just distraction. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly and tried not to think too much about it. But as the minutes passed, reality pressed harder and harder on him. The roads back into the city were crowded. Traffic signals, honking cars, and restless drivers slowed him down even more. Each time the van stopped, Daniel tapped his fingers nervously on the steering wheel. He could already imagine the disappointment and anger in his boss's eyes. He knew his boss would ask, "Where were you?" and what could Daniel say? That he had stopped to help a stranger? That he had chosen kindness over punctuality? He sighed and whispered to himself, "I just hope he understands." As he drove, he thought about Sarah, the girl he had dropped at the airport. He remembered her words about the scholarship and how important it was for her and her family. For a moment, Daniel smiled. He pictured her sitting safely on the plane, perhaps feeling grateful, perhaps already thinking about the new life waiting for her in another country. That small thought comforted him. At least one person's day had gone right, even if his own might go terribly wrong. By the time Daniel reached his first delivery stop, he was already an hour late. The shopkeeper waiting for the package frowned when Daniel carried the box inside. "You're late today," the man said coldly. "I had customers waiting." Daniel apologized quickly, but he could feel the weight of the man's disappointment. This happened again at the next stop, and again after that. Everywhere he went, people noticed the delay. Some shook their heads, others scolded him lightly. Daniel apologized to each one, but his heart sank deeper with every stop. It was nearly afternoon when Daniel finished his route. Normally, he would return to the company office on time, drop off the van, and report to his boss. Today, though, he walked inside with his head slightly lowered. His boss, Mr. Carson, was standing near the desk, arms crossed, eyes sharp like a hawk. Daniel had seen that look before, and he knew it was not a good sign. "You're late," Mr. Carson said in a cold voice. Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir. I know. I'm sorry. Something happened on the way. I don't want excuses," Mr. Carson interrupted. "Do you realize how many complaints I got this morning? Clients calling and asking where their packages were? Do you know how much damage that does to our company's name?" Daniel tried to explain, his voice gentle. Sir, I helped a young girl. She was stranded on the road with heavy luggage. She had to reach the airport for an important flight. If I hadn't stopped, she might have missed it. I couldn't just leave her there. For a moment, Daniel hoped his boss would soften. But Mr. Carson only grew angrier. You think you're some kind of hero? You're paid to deliver packages, not to play taxi driver for strangers. We run a business here. If everyone decided to do what they felt was right, nothing would get done. Do you understand that? Daniel lowered his eyes. Yes, sir. I understand. I'm really sorry. But Mr. Carson shook his head. Sorry is not enough. I warned you before about being late. I told you there would be consequences. Daniel, you're a good man, but good is not enough for this job. I can't have someone unreliable working here. I have no choice but to let you go. The words hit Daniel like a heavy stone. For a moment, he stood frozen, unable to breathe. Fired. Just like that. His entire world seemed to crumble. He thought about his wife waiting at home, his son who needed school fees, the bills stacked on the table. How would he explain this? Please, sir, Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. Give me one more chance. I'll work harder. I promise. But Mr. Carson's decision was final. I'm sorry, Daniel. Turn in your keys. You can collect your last payment next week. Daniel's hands trembled as he placed the keys on the desk. His legs felt heavy as he walked out of the office, his heart sinking lower with each step. Outside, the sun was still shining, people were still busy with their daily lives, but to Daniel, the world felt darker. He sat inside the empty van for a while before driving it back to the lot. His mind kept replaying the moment Sarah ran into the airport, thanking him with teary eyes. He had chosen kindness, and now he had lost everything. Was it worth it? He didn't know. That evening, Daniel walked home slowly. The streets that once felt familiar now felt heavy and cold. His house was small but warm, and Maria greeted him with a smile when he walked in. You're late, she said, I kept dinner warm for you. Daniel couldn't hold it anymore. He sat down at the table, buried his face in his hands, and told her everything. Maria listened quietly, her face full of worry. When he finished, she placed her hand on his shoulder and said softly, You did the right thing, Daniel. Losing a job is hard, but losing your humanity is worse. I'm proud of you. Her words gave him some comfort, but the fear in his heart remained. How would they pay rent? How would they buy groceries? How long would it take before he found another job? Daniel lay awake late into the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to his wife and son breathe softly beside him. He tried to stay hopeful, but inside he felt lost. The next morning, Daniel woke up later than usual. For years, he had been used to rising early, putting on his uniform, and heading out before the sun fully brightened the streets. But now there was no reason to rush. His job was gone. He lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of his home. His wife was already awake, preparing breakfast in the kitchen, and his son was getting ready for school. Normally, Daniel would be the one to tie Adam's shoelaces and walk him to the gate before leaving for work. Today, Adam peeked into the bedroom and asked innocently, Papa, why aren't you going to work? Daniel's heart tightened. He forced a small smile and said, Papa is taking a little rest today, son. Don't worry, I'll go again soon. Adam nodded without questioning, but Daniel could see the curiosity in his young eyes. He wanted to protect his child from worry, at least for now. At the breakfast table, Maria placed a plate of eggs and bread in front of Daniel. She looked at him kindly, but he could see the quiet concern hiding behind her eyes. You should eat, she said softly. You'll need strength. We'll find a way through this. Daniel nodded and tried to eat, though every bite felt heavy. He kept thinking about the bills due at the end of the week, about Adam's school fees, about the groceries they still needed. He had always been the provider of the family, the one who carried the weight of responsibility. Now, without his job, he felt powerless. After breakfast, Daniel decided to go out and look for new work. He put on his cleanest shirt, tucked it in carefully, and walked into the city with determination. At the first delivery company he visited, he explained his years of experience and asked if they had a position. The manager shook his head apologetically. "We're not hiring right now." At the second company, he was told he needed a recommendation from someone inside before he could be considered. At the third, the man behind the desk simply said, "Leave your details, we'll call you if we need anyone." By the end of the day, Daniel had walked for miles, knocked on countless doors, and received nothing but rejection. His legs were tired, his throat was dry, and his spirit felt broken. When he returned home, Adam ran to him, excited to show a drawing he had made at school. "Look, Papa. It's us, Mama, you, and me," he said proudly. Daniel looked at the paper, at the smiling stick figures his son had drawn, and he forced a smile even though his heart was aching. He hugged Adam tightly, thinking to himself, "I must not give up. For him, I must keep trying." The following days were the same. Daniel woke up, left home with hope, and returned with disappointment. He visited restaurants, warehouses, shops, and offices, asking if they needed someone hardworking and reliable. Some employers looked at him kindly but said they had no space. Others dismissed him without even listening to his story. The rejection cut deeper each time, but Daniel tried to remain strong in front of his family. At night, when Maria noticed him staring silently into the distance, she would remind him, "Everything happens for a reason. Don't lose faith." Her words gave him small strength, though doubts continued to grow inside him. He wondered if helping Sarah at the airport had been a mistake. Was it foolish to sacrifice his job for a stranger? But then he remembered her grateful eyes, her words, "You saved my future." That memory stopped him from regretting fully. Still, fear of the unknown pressed on his heart. One evening, Daniel sat outside his house on a wooden stool, watching the neighbors. Some were returning from work, tired but secure. Others were chatting happily, carrying bags of groceries. Daniel felt a pang of envy. He wanted to provide the same comfort for his family. Instead, Maria was stretching every coin to make food last, and Adam was asking for little things Daniel could no longer easily provide. Days turned into a week, and the pressure increased. The landlord came by to remind Daniel about the rent. The grocery store owner politely asked when he would clear his tab. Daniel felt ashamed each time he heard those questions. He was a man who had always worked honestly, and now he was struggling to stand tall. One night, as he lay in bed, he heard Maria whisper, "Maybe I can take some sewing work from the neighbor. It might help." Daniel turned to her quickly. "No, Maria. You already do so much for this family. It's my duty to provide. I'll find something, I promise." But Maria only smiled gently and said, "We're a team, Daniel. We'll face this together." Her strength amazed him. Even when he was breaking inside, she held him up with her quiet courage. Daniel kissed her hand, silently grateful for her support. The next morning, Daniel decided to try something different. Instead of only asking for delivery work, he approached construction sites and small shops. He was ready to do anything honest, no matter how hard. But even then, luck seemed against him. At one site, the supervisor said he was too old for the heavy lifting they required. At another shop, the owner said they only wanted part-time help from young boys. As he walked home that day, exhausted and discouraged, Daniel stopped near a park bench. He sat down and buried his face in his hands. A part of him wanted to cry, but he held it back. Instead, he prayed silently, asking for guidance, for a chance, for hope. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. Families passed by, laughing together. Daniel watched them, thinking of Maria and Adam at home, waiting for him. No matter how heavy his heart was, he knew he had to walk back with a smile, for their sake. When he reached home, Maria welcomed him with her usual warmth. She didn't ask about his search that day, perhaps because she could already see the answer in his tired eyes. She simply served him food and reminded him again, "Don't give up. Something good will come." Daniel lay awake again that night, wondering how long he could keep going. He thought about Sarah once more. By now, she must have reached her new country, starting her studies, building her future. Did she ever think of the man who helped her? Did she even remember him? He didn't expect anything in return, but sometimes he wished that kindness brought its reward sooner. Daniel woke up the next morning with the same heavy feeling in his chest. The last few days had been nothing but disappointment. He dressed in plain clothes, sat on the edge of the bed for a while, and thought about where else he could try for work. His mind felt clouded, but he knew he couldn't stop searching. He stepped into the small kitchen where Maria was making tea. She looked at him and smiled softly, though he could see her eyes were worried. "Maybe today will be different," she whispered. Daniel nodded, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. The morning passed slowly. He left the house with a small folder that carried his identification papers and an old resume, worn from being handed out too many times. Each place he visited gave him the same answer: not hiring right now. By noon, his legs ached from walking, and his throat was dry from explaining himself again and again. Daniel finally stopped under the shade of a tree near a bus stop. He sat down and closed his eyes, wondering if his efforts were worth anything. While sitting there, his phone began to ring. Daniel pulled it from his pocket, expecting it to be Maria asking about his day. But the number was unknown. For a moment, he hesitated. Unknown numbers rarely brought good news. Still, he answered. "Hello? Is this Daniel?" a man's voice asked politely. "Yes, this is Daniel," he replied cautiously. The man continued, "My name is Richard. I'm calling about something very important. You don't know me, but my daughter Sarah told me about you." Daniel froze where he sat. His heart started to beat faster. Sarah, the girl from the airport. He remembered her face, her words, her tears of gratitude. He hadn't heard her name since that day. "Sarah," he repeated slowly. "Yes," Richard said warmly. "She told me everything about how you helped her reach the airport when she almost missed her flight. She said you went out of your way, even risking your own work, to make sure she made it. She arrived safely, thanks to you. And she asked me to thank you personally." Daniel felt a strange rush of emotions. For days, he had been doubting his choice, wondering if it had been foolish to help her. And now, here was her father calling him, speaking with gratitude. He swallowed hard before replying, "It was nothing, sir. She needed help, and I couldn't ignore her. Anyone would have done the same." Richard chuckled softly. "Not everyone, Daniel. Many people would have driven past, thinking only of themselves. But you didn't. You helped my daughter in a moment that could have changed her life forever. That says a lot about the kind of man you are." Daniel didn't know what to say. For days, he had been treated like a failure, but now this stranger was speaking to him with respect and kindness. He simply replied, "I'm glad she made it safely. That's all that matters." There was a pause on the line, then Richard said, "Daniel, I'd like to meet you. Would you be willing to come by my office tomorrow morning? I'd like to thank you properly." Daniel hesitated. Sir, I. I don't want to trouble you. I'm just an ordinary man. Richard's voice grew firm but kind. Please, Daniel. It's no trouble. It would mean a lot to me. I insist. Finally, Daniel agreed. Richard gave him the address, and when Daniel ended the call, he sat quietly for a while, letting the conversation sink in. For the first time in days, his heart felt lighter. He didn't know what would come of this meeting, but he felt a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. That evening, he told Maria about the call. She looked at him with wide eyes, her face brightening. You see? I told you, kindness never goes unnoticed. Something good was bound to come. She encouraged him to prepare his cleanest clothes for the meeting. Daniel nodded, though he still worried. What if it was just a polite thank you and nothing more? Still, he decided to go. The next morning, Daniel woke early and dressed carefully. He wore a neatly ironed shirt and polished his old shoes until they shone. He kissed Maria and Adam before leaving, promising to return with good news if he could. When he reached the address Richard had given, he was surprised. It was a tall glass building in the center of the city, modern and impressive. People in suits walked briskly in and out, holding briefcases and speaking on phones. Daniel felt small in comparison, but he reminded himself to stay calm. He walked to the reception desk, gave his name, and was escorted upstairs. Richard's office was large but welcoming. Behind the wide desk sat a man in his early 50s, with kind eyes and a strong presence. He stood up as Daniel entered and walked around the desk to greet him with a firm handshake. Daniel. I'm so glad you came. Daniel bowed his head slightly in respect. Thank you for inviting me, sir. Please, sit, Richard said, guiding him to a comfortable chair. On the table were 2 cups of tea already waiting. As they sat, Richard began, my daughter told me how much you helped her. She said she would have missed her flight without you, and that would have cost her the scholarship she worked so hard for. You must know what that means to her and to us as a family. Education has always been our dream for her. And because of you, she made it. Daniel listened quietly, his hands resting nervously on his knees. I'm just glad I could help. She deserved that chance. Richard leaned forward, studying him. Tell me, Daniel. What do you do for a living? Daniel hesitated before answering honestly. I was a delivery man. But I lost my job because I was late that day. My boss didn't want to hear my explanation. Since then, I've been looking for work, but, he stopped, his voice trailing off. Richard's brows lifted in surprise. You lost your job because you helped my daughter. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, sir. But I don't regret it. She needed me. I just wish my boss had understood. For a moment, Richard was silent. Then he smiled in admiration. Daniel, men like you are rare. You chose humanity over personal gain. That kind of character is priceless. Daniel lowered his gaze humbly. Thank you, sir. I only did what I felt was right. Richard tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. Then he said firmly, Daniel, I'd like to offer you something. I own this company, and we are always looking for honest, hard-working people. You may not have experience in business, but I can see you have something more important: integrity. Would you consider working with us? Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Sir, are you offering me a job? Richard nodded with a warm smile. Yes, Daniel. A stable job, with good pay and respect. I believe a man like you belongs here, not struggling on the streets. What do you say? For a moment, Daniel felt tears press against his eyes. He thought of Maria, of Adam, of the sleepless nights worrying about the future. This offer felt like a miracle. He stood slowly and shook Richard's hand firmly. "I don't know how to thank you, sir. I will work hard. I won't disappoint you." Richard patted his shoulder. "That's all I ask, Daniel. Hard work and honesty. The rest will follow." As Daniel left the office later that day, his steps were lighter than they had been in weeks. He looked up at the sky, feeling gratitude fill his heart. Life had tested him, pushed him to the edge, but in the end, kindness had brought him back to hope. The next morning felt different for Daniel. For the first time in weeks, he woke up not with dread but with excitement. His heart beat faster as he realized he had a new chance, a chance he never imagined would come his way. Maria was already awake, preparing breakfast, and when Daniel told her again about the job offer, her eyes filled with tears of relief. She hugged him tightly and whispered, "See, I told you, Daniel. Kindness always finds its way back." Adam, who was sitting at the table eating bread and jam, looked up with curiosity. "Papa, you got a new job?" he asked. Daniel smiled at his son and ruffled his hair. "Yes, Adam. A good one. Things will be better now." That day, Daniel dressed in his cleanest shirt once more and walked to the tall glass building where Richard had welcomed him the day before. He felt nervous as he entered the office, but he also felt a sense of pride. The receptionist greeted him politely this time, already knowing who he was. "Good morning, Mr. Daniel. You can go right up. Mr. Richard is expecting you." The word Mr. before his name made Daniel's chest swell a little. He had never been addressed with such respect before. When he entered Richard's office, the man stood to greet him warmly. "Welcome, Daniel. I'm glad you're here. Let's begin." Richard introduced him to some of the staff and explained that Daniel would start in the logistics department, helping to organize deliveries and schedules for the company. Though it was not glamorous, it was steady and important work. Daniel listened carefully, nodding at every instruction. He wanted to show from the very first day that he was serious and reliable. The first week was challenging. Daniel had to learn new systems, use computers he had never touched before, and understand how a large company functioned. There were moments when he felt lost, staring at the screen or struggling to remember instructions. But instead of giving up, he asked questions, stayed late, and practiced until things became clearer. The younger staff noticed his determination and respected him for it. At home, Maria noticed the change in him. His shoulders no longer slumped with despair, and his smile was returning. Adam was happy too, because his father was in better spirits. The house, which had felt heavy with worry for so long, was now filled with hope again. One evening, as the family sat together for dinner, Daniel shared something Richard had told him that day. He said I remind him of when he first started his business. He said honesty and hard work are more valuable than anything else. Can you believe that? Daniel shook his head in disbelief, but Maria smiled proudly. You see, Daniel. That is who you are. You never realized it, but others can see it in you. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel settled well into his new role. He became known in the office as the man who was always willing to help, who never cut corners, and who treated everyone with respect from the cleaning staff to the executives. His simple kindness made people trust him. Richard often called him in to discuss small matters, and slowly, Daniel began to feel he truly belonged in this place. One afternoon, Sarah returned from her studies abroad for a short visit. She came to the office to meet her father and asked if Daniel could join them. When Daniel entered the room, Sarah stood up quickly and walked over to him. "Mr. Daniel," she said with a bright smile, "I don't know how to thank you enough. Because of you, I didn't lose my scholarship. I've already completed my first semester, and I'm learning so much. None of this would have been possible without your help that day." Daniel felt shy, but he smiled warmly. "You worked hard for that opportunity, Sarah. I just gave you a ride. The rest was your effort. Sarah shook her head firmly. No, it was more than that. You gave me a chance to prove myself. And I will never forget it. Richard looked at both of them with pride and said, Daniel, this is what I mean. A single act of kindness can change lives in ways we don't even imagine. The moment filled Daniel's heart with quiet joy. He realized that sometimes, what feels like a small decision can create ripples far greater than one can see. At home, life improved for the family. With his stable income, Daniel was able to clear their debts and pay Adam's school fees on time. They could afford better meals, and Maria no longer had to stretch every coin with worry. On weekends, Daniel took Adam to the park or read him stories before bed, something he hadn't had energy for in the past. The simple joys returned to their lives. One night, as Daniel sat outside his house under the stars, Maria came to sit beside him. Do you remember the day you came home after losing your job? She asked gently. Daniel nodded. I remember. I thought it was the end for us. Maria placed her hand on his. But it was only the beginning. You see, sometimes life closes one door so that a better one can open. You helped someone, and because of that, we were helped in return. Never doubt that kindness is worth it. Daniel looked up at the night sky and felt a wave of gratitude. He thought about his old boss, Mr. Carson, who had fired him without listening. At first, Daniel had felt bitterness about it, but now he felt only peace. If he had not lost that job, he would never have met Richard or found this new path. Perhaps life had guided him exactly where he needed to be. Months later, Daniel was promoted to a higher position in the company. He now managed a small team of workers in the logistics department. When new employees joined, he encouraged them with the same words Richard had once told him: hard work and honesty will always take you further than shortcuts. His story spread quietly among the staff, and he became an inspiration for others. On the day of his promotion, Richard invited Daniel to his office once more. Daniel, he said with a smile, I knew from the start that you were special. You proved me right. I'm proud to have you here. Daniel stood with humility, thanking him sincerely. As he walked out of the office that day, he thought about how far he had come. From being a delivery man struggling to make ends meet, to losing everything, and now to finding a new path filled with respect and opportunity. All because he chose kindness when it mattered most. When he reached home that evening, Adam ran into his arms and shouted, Papa, Mama told me you got promoted. Daniel lifted his son high into the air, laughing with joy. Yes, Adam. And one day, you will do even greater things. That night, the family celebrated with a simple meal, but the happiness in their hearts made it feel like a feast. Daniel looked at his wife and son, and silently promised himself that he would never forget the lesson life had taught him. Sometimes sacrifice brings hardship, but true kindness always finds its way back, often in ways more beautiful than one can imagine. And as he lay in bed later that night, Daniel closed his eyes with peace. He no longer feared tomorrow. The man who had once walked home with nothing now carried hope, respect, and a new future for himself and for his family.